What if there was a free and easy way for you to figure out right now whether you can get a book deal and share what you can do to make your book idea a bestseller? In this episode, I'm so excited to share a very simple tool that has helped thousands of experts just like you to know whether they are ready for a book deal and whether you are ready for a book deal. And if not, what you can do next to make that a reality. This assessment has helped multiple entrepreneurs land book deals worth literally millions of dollars and will help you as well. And of course, I designed it. So I'm very, very proud to bring this to you today. So let's dig in. I've run my own business as a professional book collaborator, ghostwriter, and editor since 2012. In 2019, I decided to grow my business and start marketing online. And very quickly, two things happened. First, I realized there are so many awesome, amazing people out there with great ideas for a book. And second, there was no fucking way I could help every single person individually, which is why I decided to create a simple assessment to help those experts, entrepreneurs, and creators like you who want a book deal, who want to traditionally publish, or are simply exploring their options. In this episode, I'm going to give you an insider's look to how I designed my quiz and why taking the quiz can actually be a cheat code to your success as an author, whether you decide to work with me and my team or not. Spoiler alert, all the questions on the quiz, all the questions on the assessment lead to the most important question that you must answer as an expert, as an entrepreneur, and as a creator who wants a book deal. So before we jump into the number one question, and of course, you get to prompt your own answer as you're listening or watching, let's start at the beginning. So after you provide details like your name and your email, the first question I ask is, what kind of book are you writing? And the reason for this is simple. I specialize in prescriptive how-to books that can, but aren't always labeled as self-help, which means I don't work on personal stories, I don't work on memoirs, I don't work on cookbooks, I don't work on children's books, I don't work on fiction, I don't work on narrative nonfiction, and honestly, I don't work on most types of books. Where often I see people get confused is that a lot of experts, entrepreneurs, and creators want to share their story. They want to, write it as a narrative, almost like a fiction, right? Except that it's true. Almost like a novel, except that it's true. And they expect readers to learn from the stories, right? Like if I show you the lesson I learned, then you'll learn it. And while that is valid, I just don't work on those types of books, okay? And really that is the difference. So I often bring up two books. I bring up Shoe Dog, which is written by the founder of Nike, and How to Grow Your Small Business, which is written by Donald Miller, the creator of Story Brand, right? In Shoe Dog, he's just sharing all his stories about how he grew this multinational company, versus in How to Grow Your Own Small Business, he's giving you prescriptive how-to advice that is like directed at you. So there's another element to this, which is parables. And don't even get me started on that. That's like The Alchemist, right? Or the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Don't even get me started on that. That's a whole different thing. It's like an advanced art form. It's like an epistolary novel or a novel in letters or writing a whole book in second person. It's like a flashy trick that we don't usually do. So I'm just going to throw those out for the purpose of this podcast. Okay. So after you answer what kind of book are you writing? And you're writing a how-to book that has advice and is giving advice and giving takeaways and to-dos and action steps. Then you get to the next question, which is, do you have a business or brand that serves the same audience as your book? And this is a sneaky question to tell me about your platform. So an author's platform, the author's ability to sell a book is necessary to get a traditional deal. And that is because traditional publishers make money on sales, right? Unlike a hybrid, unlike a self-publishing venture, the author isn't really putting up any money. They're actually paying you for the rights to publish your book. And so a platform is necessary. And honestly, building a platform doesn't really make sense without a business, at least not to me. That's why a lot of times fiction authors don't really have a platform, because what are they going to do, right? It's just sort of weird and nonsensical to me. What I learned too, when I was working with authors, is that building an entire business around a book, or even growing an author platform around a book, doesn't really make sense. And that's because a book is a low-cost product. So you've got to have a really big audience for it to work. And then you can't really build a business just around that. It takes too much time. It's too much effort. Building a platform is a lot of work. And so you have to really want the other things that come with a platform in order to have a successful traditional published book. Okay. So do you have a business? Right? If you say, yes, I have a business, I have a brand that serves the same audience in my book, then you get moved on to the next question, which is, have you developed intellectual property related to your business, your brand, and your book? So it shocks me sometimes to realize how many entrepreneurs and experts and creators don't know what intellectual property is. So basically it is things that you have designed. So this podcast, this YouTube episode is a piece of my intellectual property. It's something I've written. It's something I've created. I own the copyright. I own trademarks to certain things. So like I own the trademark to my name, for example. That's intellectual property I own. And so you want intellectual property because it makes you unique and it gives you something to sell. It gives something to the publishers to license. You might be giving the same basic business advice as dozens of entrepreneurs on the internet, but because you've put a different framework on it or you're serving a different audience, you've carved out this niche, you own that intellectual property, and we can then sell that in the form of a book. What I see most often is people that do, have a very lucrative business, often in areas like therapy or coaching or psychology or, health, where they're saying the same stuff as everyone else. And so because they're saying the same stuff as everybody else, or they're using other people's work as the basis for their work, we don't really have an intellectual property leg to stand on. We don't really have something unique to them that only them are putting out in the world that then we can monetize. So that's the challenge, right? You need the intellectual property. And the other thing about this question, right? Have you developed intellectual property related to your business, your brand, and your book? Also, if you're trying to write a book that's not related to your business, it also doesn't really make sense and your platform sort of disappears. So you lose that platform piece that's ultimately necessary. Okay, so let's say you answered, yes, I have intellectual property. It's related to my business. It's related to my brand. It's related to my book. Then we go to the next question, which is, do you have an engaged audience? This matters because engagement is queen on the internet. Publishers notice engagement. So I have a client, she has a huge Instagram following. It's probably between 500,000 and 1 million followers. But when her proposal was on submission to editors at publishing houses, a lot of them asked her agent and therefore asked us, why there was low engagement. They noticed there wasn't a lot of comments. There wasn't a lot of shares. There wasn't a lot of saves. And so that's really important because the internet has changed, right? Publishers know that social media has changed and that when you post, say, an Instagram reel, not every single one of your followers is going to see that. So you really want an engaged audience because what that will do is indicate then that you can sell things to that audience, because when an audience is not engaged, you can't really sell them anything, right? They're just sort of vanity number followers versus people that are really engaged in your audience. You can use that, right? You can market to them, you can sell to them, you can sell your book to them. And that is ultimately what's important in getting a traditional book deal. Okay, so let's say you said yes to do you have an engaged audience. The next question I'm going to ask is, how big is your audience? So this is really simple. It's honestly math. So like any products out there in the world, the number of products, in this case books, you're able to sell is directly related to the number of people you reach. It is directly related to the size of your audience, their engagement, and therefore their conversion rate. So conversion being how many people buy when you're selling something. Online conversion is usually 1% to 2%. So if we take that 1% to 2%, right, we're able to say, okay, then you need 50 times that number of people. So if we need to sell 20,000 copies in the first year, ultimately we need 50 times that number. So we need 100,000 followers to make that work. So engagement matters a lot here. But often as an author, if you are able to say, hey, I have 100,000 followers, across platforms, whether that's on my email list or through speaking or, on Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn, and I'm able to convert them consistently at 2 to 5% for higher priced offers than a book, right? Something that's more expensive than $30. which almost everything hopefully is going to be, then that's a really good indicator for book sales. And that is why I'm asking you how big your audience is, because this is a super important question. It is equally as important as how much potential I see in your book. How likely do I think it's going to sell? How likely is I think you're going to have an agent? How likely is it I think you're going to get a deal? Because that is ultimately the question I have to ask before I take anyone on. I'm not just taking someone's money to write them a very expensive document that's not going to go anywhere. I want you to succeed. I want you to have everything you need in order to get that book deal of your dreams. And that starts with this quiz. It starts with this assessment. So that is the quiz. If you want to run it back, you can. It's a very short episode, right? And you're going to notice I didn't necessarily give you all the right answers. And if I see a flood of, people gaining the quiz, I'm going to be like, yo, I need to take this podcast offline. But ultimately, like, the right answers are the answers that are going to be right for you. Because if you do that game the quiz, and people do that, right? People run the quiz multiple times. We see that on our back-end systems. We can see how you answer. We can see who's taking the quiz, who's not taking the quiz. We know all of that, right? Big data to the win. But like when you do that, I think it's like out of disservice to you. Because honestly, like the right answer is going to be your answer, and understanding your path is going to be a unique thing. So just know that when you go take the quiz, you might not get the answer you like, and that's fine. It will still give you a path to move to the right answer, to move to the answer you want, whether that's working with us or not. So you might be wondering at this point what the number one most important question you need to answer is. Well, the secret is that all of these questions, and more specifically, your answers to these questions, help me to know the answer to the most important question, and whether you, and I'm talking to you, each one of you listening to this or watching this, will be successful at landing a book deal and writing a best-selling book or not. And that question is, how many copies can you sell? Emphasis on the how, because publishers will want to know and expect to see exactly how you will sell your book in your book proposal. So for more on that, you can check out the episodes linked in the show notes. But publishers will want to know that your plans are based on previous evidence. They're not just plans. All right? They're not just plans. You're not writing a proposal and being like, I'm going to have a platform by the time this book's done. That's not real, y'all. And publishers know that. Okay? A lot of people want to grow a platform. A lot of people want a book deal, but very few, about 3% in my experience, in my world, actually follow through on that shit. So that's why plans aren't good enough. Okay. So where do you get that previous evidence, right? Where do you get that how I'm going to sell books? Emphasis on the how. Well, we can cycle back to the quiz for that. So question 2, your business, right? That's related to the book. Your business success matters when it comes to your book. How prominent your business is, how popular your business is, how many fans you have, how many followers you have, what your marketing is, what your sales rate is. All those things really matter. What your revenue is, all those matter. Question number 3, the intellectual property that's unique to you and that your audience buys. This is a must-have. This is not an optional thing. Intellectual property is ownership, and ownership is key because a book deal is a license. Ultimately, from a legal perspective and a business perspective, it is a license. And so you want to give the publisher something to license. And that's not going to be something generic that everybody else is talking about on social media. Okay? It's got to be something unique to you. Even if it's just universal truths or scientific facts or, health information that you're putting your own spin on, that's fine. That's all fair game, but that's still intellectual property. Okay? Question 4, you're engaged in hopefully large audience. This is also a must. I get a lot of people coming into my DMs and in my inbox being like, hey, I want a book deal. And they have like 10 followers. Not going to happen, bro. So you need to grow this audience and hopefully get them engaged, right? That engagement is key to a large audience. A lot of people say, well, why does she have 100,000 followers and I don't? You've got to be looking at your content and whether you are actually putting content out there that engages your audience. And number 5, a proven way to sell that you can insert your book into when it's available. This is a big deal. I just wrote a proposal last week, and what I did was I took all the author's existing platform, so their social media, their connections, their media, their, platforms they're on to teach. They're an educator in this case, their resume. And I said, hey, using all these things, how could we insert the book in every single one of these instances? And it was easy to do that. It was easy to make that argument. It was easy to show it. And even though that author had over 1 million direct followers and the ability to reach like 50 million people, they were still like, hey, here's some areas that I see are weak for me and that I have opportunity to grow. And that's the mentality you want to be in. You want to have a proven way to sell that you can insert your book into when it's available, that you've already been practicing, you've already been growing, and you already have proof of in like an obvious way, in a public way, that they can Google your name and something good will come up. Okay, so all of that is what gives publishers a quick and dirty way to guesstimate how many books you can sell, and also gives them a way to see how much money they can make, because that's what publishers are all about, right? It's a business opportunity. They're more, venture capitalists than fairy godmothers or fairy god people. Okay. So you want to give them obvious ways to make money. And so a lot of people don't do that. They focus on the idea. They focus on their feelings about their books, and publishers don't give a shit about that. They're very capitalist. Okay. They want to sell books, and you need to make that easy for them and obvious on how you're going to help them do that. That combined with a great idea, because idea and selling work in lockstep, right? You can have a huge platform and a bad idea and that book won't sell. A lot of celebrity books end up in that camp, right? Melania ends up in that camp. Okay. Or you can have a great idea and no platform and it still won't sell. We need both, y'all. Okay. So that wraps up this episode, but I really want to hear from you. What questions do you have about traditional publishing? I put a link in the show notes so you can leave me a voicemail or send me an email. I really want to know. I'm writing the podcast for the rest of this year, and I would love to be able to answer questions directly from y'all and create content that serves, what you're doing right now in this moment. So please, please, please don't hesitate and go ahead and jump in those show notes and leave me a voicemail if you're comfortable, or directly send me an email. My email is directly in there. You will get me. It's not going to some random inbox. It's going directly to me, and I will respond to every single email. As always, y'all, I hope this has been helpful. And until next time, cheers to your success. Thanks for tuning into the Kind of Big Book Deal podcast. Want to see where you're at on your book journey? Check out my free quiz at meghanstevenson.com/quiz. That's MEGHANSTEVENSON.com/quiz. See you next time.